Hey, what's up guys, it's Arun, and today I've got such a good video for you guys. I'm just showing you how I repaired and refurbished a broken Xbox 360 Slim. It had the red dot of death, pretty much meaning that every time I turned on the console it would switch back off straight away with the fans at 100% speed, and how I repaired it completely, and a couple of other little bugs that it had, and how it turned out in the end as a final product. So the console I ended up picking up was a 4GB edition Xbox 360, pretty much meaning it doesn't have any internal hard drive inside of it. The packaging itself was pretty roughed up. It did however have the original Xbox box that it came with. I'm thinking maybe in the future I might try and refurbish this box as well, because it is quite rare to get an original box with a 360 like this. The edition was the white, which is personally my favorite looking Xbox 360. It also came with a Kinect as well as one game of Battlefield 3. Unfortunately it didn't come with any controllers, but I did buy a couple of extra ones down the track, and we'll get to those in a little bit. So plugging the Xbox 360 into a screen and hooking it up to power, you can see the second I press the power button, the Xbox actually turns to life. The button turns green for a little bit of time, and you see the Xbox logo on screen, which is fantastic news because that means that the output video is working properly. But straight away the fans are on 100% speed, and you can see that light turns red straight away, blinking rapidly, and then it shuts itself down within a few seconds. So this is pretty much the issue it has, so let's see if we can fix it. So I started off by taking off the top panel. I'm not going to give you a full teardown video on how I took it all apart. I'll leave in the description below all the tutorials that I followed to tear apart this Xbox 360. There's some really nice in-depth videos that you can follow along which teach you how to break it all apart and put it all back together without having any issues. And so yeah, if you want to do something like this, I highly recommend watching those videos down in the description below. So after I took off the top pieces, it was pretty simple. All I needed to do was pull off the plastic inserts that hold down the silver sheathing. But the main issue here is it's actually welded together with the silver sheathing, so you need to break the little welds, and this takes a little bit of time and force, especially if it's the first time that you've entered into this console. Now I did notice a couple of little scratch marks and prying marks of someone previously trying to enter this console and open it apart, but as you can see the weldings are completely fresh, so there is no indication that somebody's actually torn it completely apart, which is fantastic news for me. Next it was time to pull out the silver sheathing, and that was pretty simple as well. It has a couple of clips going around the edges, and with just a screwdriver you can pry them up and pop it right off. So now it's time to pull apart the actual physical body of it. This is a little bit more complicated because you need to push down on one point to open up all the clips, but it is again held together with just a couple of clips. And once this is off, you're inside the console itself. So I tore it apart pretty quickly, just following along the tutorial. The fan shroud popped right off, and then it was the disc tray that came off, and the small back piece which clips on, that went off right next, as well as the hard drive bay, and we were pretty much left with just a case and the motherboard itself. And we were pretty much left with the bare bones console itself, which again, a couple more screws on the back, and the motherboard fell off completely from the casing. So now that we had the motherboard by itself, all we needed to do was take off the heatsink and the fan. I took off the fan separately, and then it was just the X clamp on the back, and with a bit of pressure with a screwdriver, I was able to pop that off as well. So you don't really need to do this, but I just thought while I was inside the console, it was a good idea just to clean off the old thermal paste and put on some fresh coating in there. Now you can actually see that the console is really clean on the inside, which leads me to believe that it's actually not been used much in its life. It just pretty much probably got the red dot of death a few weeks into use and was just left aside from then on. So now that we have the motherboard by itself, it's time to test a couple of the resistors to make sure that the right current is flowing through them. So you can see them on screen right now. They're really small, but they are labeled with a bit of text, and if you use a magnifying glass you can spot them quite easily. These resistors are labeled R4D3, R4D4, and all the way down to R4D8. So using a multimeter I was able to test it, and I could tell that the resistor that was giving the highest ohms reading was malfunctioning, which is causing the problem on the Xbox. So the reading should be about between 0.5 all the way up to about 2. Anything higher than 2 is probably going to cause a problem in this circuit. So you can see the resistors were performing quite well between this kind of range until we reached R4D6, and this resistor is giving us a reading of anywhere between 58 all the way up to 80, which is completely busted. So it shows us that this resistor is completely gone. But just for continuity's sake, I'm going to replace all of the resistors. So the tools to repair this are actually quite simple. All you really need is a soldering iron, a bit of solder, and if you have some experience with soldering, it really help because this is quite a small circuit. So I'm going to say it's going to require a bit more difficulty in performing this kind of an operation. So all I did was I chucked my soldering iron on 300 degrees centigrade, and then I just moved slowly down, touching each resistor once at a time, and it just simply popped off by the heat transferred from the soldering iron. Once all the resistors had fallen off the motherboard, I used some sticky tape and some tweezers to make sure that they were kept safely on the side, just in case I ever need them again. Now that I had the circuit board completely bare, I just simply cleaned it off with a bit of alcohol wipes and then prepared it for some solder. So all I'm going to do is solder a few jumpers across. Now you can use some wire, but I don't have any on me right now. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to solder actual solder line across the two little gaps. So it takes a little bit of time to do this, and you have to be quite careful to make sure that each line is separate from another so that the circuits don't jump across. But once I was finished, I was able to test it again with a multimeter, and it is really important for you to test it a second time before you put it together, just in case you've made a mistake somewhere. But you can see now that all the readings are showing at 1.2, which gives us a perfect indication that these circuits are performing quite well. So now that we've repaired the motherboard, it's time to just give it a little bit of a clean and put it all back together. But again, this console was actually so clean inside that I didn't really have to clean much of it. I just changed the thermal paste, which was still wet by the way, and then put it all back together. And the assembly process was just as simple as the disassembly. Again, I'll link down another video in the description box of a guy I followed when he reassembled his console, just if you need a little bit of assistance with this procedure. So the other issue the console was having was the disc tray was actually opening and closing every once in a while, and the power button was actually activating without me even touching it every once in a while, which was really annoying if you're trying to use the console. And even when you leave it into power, after about 10 minutes, you can come back into the room and the screen is on, the console's running, disc is going in and out of the disc tray. So it is a little bit of a problem that we need to fix. Luckily, this is a really simple fix. All you need is some electrical tape and a bit of patience. So all I did was I cut out a few strips of electrical tape and taped them right behind the disc eject button, as well as on the cable that connects it to the Xbox 360 itself. So giving these a bit of a coating of tape will prevent these buttons from activating when you don't want them to. Once again, I followed another tutorial on YouTube for this example, so I'll drop a link down in the description box again. Please check him out, he's a great guy and he will respond to your comments if you have any issues with an Xbox 360 as well. The Kinect system itself was also working quite nicely and I hooked that up as well. It didn't need a cleaning or anything. Again, it looks pretty much brand new, which is fantastic. And I tested it out a little bit. I don't have any Kinect games, but just moving through the UI and stuff worked pretty much flawlessly. And I was able to use the voice commands for a few basic things. Again, it is Kinect, so there's not much you can do with it. So finally, the controllers. Now, it didn't come with a controller, unfortunately. So I went out and picked out a couple of controllers second hand, and one of them was completely busted, which I thought was perfect for this video, and I might as well fix it up and give it a nice new paint job. So the main issue this controller had was the Y button and the LB button weren't working at all. If I pressed them, they were really mushy and they weren't really registering at all when I was gaming. So to fix this, I took the controller apart. It just uses a couple of Torx screws on the back. They are security Torx, which means there's a pin that goes through the center of it. So you will need to break off that pin with a flathead screwdriver, but with a bit of patience you can remove all of them, and thankfully there aren't any clips holding the controller together, so it simply falls apart in your hands and you're left with pretty much all the bare bones components right inside of it. So I just took them all off one at a time. But with those off, the controller's left completely bare bones, and I simply took it outside and gave it a light sanding with some 320 grit sandpaper just to rough up the surface a little bit and give the paint something to stick on. I used Rust-Oleum's 2X Ultra Glossy white paint, and I gave it about 5 coats with about 20 minutes break in between each coat to give it time to adhere to the surface, and then I left it for about 48 hours to completely dry nicely. And putting the controller back together was actually super satisfying. I was able to fix the problem with the Y button. It was just sitting wrong, and the LB button did require a little bit of duct tape that I cut out into small circles to put in front of the sensor because it had been pushed out of alignment. But with that in place, the controller works perfectly fine and was able to pair up with the Xbox and play completely normally. So with that done, we had our final build with the Xbox 360 Slim. Now it looks really nice in my opinion. The white paint I used on the controller was a little bit brighter than the natural color of the Xbox. But with that aside, the controller, Xbox and Kinect all look fantastic together, and it games really nicely without any problems. The temperatures are fine, the fan never ramps up too high, and it is running really well. So anyway guys, that's pretty much all from me today. Now if you did enjoy this video, please be sure to drop a sub down below. Only a small proportion of my viewers actually subscribe to the channel, so it would mean a lot to me if you drop a sub down below. And let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.